Well, this is Baruch here at the Tikkun Elevator Kola. You know that in previous Yeshiurim that we've been talking about the rectification of Malchus through song, and how important it is to be involved in song which is really sincere, rather than song is for the purpose of just showing off in some way that you're important. We're all like this and varying in between these ideas, because there's no question that all of us want to be honored. So we have a Yetzer Hara. We could go one way, we could go another way. Let's read this little story that is brought here by Rabbi Nachman. Now the Likutei Moharan had set up above, because this concept of for behind the nursing eyes, which is from the back, he brought him to tend his people Yaakov, meaning that even a person who learns from the backside, which is the side of showing off or selfishness, who's doing it for personal reasons, he says even that David HaMelech is able to rectify. For it was through him that David HaMelech merited Malchus, kingship, to be our king. He can even rectify that about ourselves. Now, let's go, and he has a story. So Rabbi Nosson, concerning the revelation at Sinai, it's written, then God spoke to you out of the fire. You heard the sounds of words, but saw no image, nothing but a voice. It is the same today. For whoever attempts to come close to God and the Torah, in his kindness, God fills each person with ideas on how to come closer to him. The channel through which these thoughts, which are called mochin, he says, the mochin are really the brain matters, I guess it's the thoughts, descend to a person is the voice. So in other words, there's a voice in your head that's talking to you, that calls out to him, often disguised as conscious, reminding him to steer clear of folly and encouraging him to return to God. The choice is the person's. If he wishes, he can hear that voice of holiness calling to him, because that's the direction of eternity, and we want to go that way. Alternatively, he can listen for the voice of impurity, which is the voice of the body, which is temporary but strong, because it wants to survive, and it wants to enjoy itself, which, if he follows it, will lead him astray. Now, this was the story of the Jewish people's bondage in Egypt. He said, Pharaoh is also the word oref, which means the back of the neck, behind the throat. His desire was to trap speech, that is the Malchus of holiness. He enslaved the Jews and constantly burdened them with labor so to prevent them from praying to God. Just imagine that you're not allowed to pray or to gather to pray. No time for it. When the time for the Exodus drew near, the scripture states, the Jewish people sighed, screamed out, and groaned. God saw that the Jews were beginning to rouse from their slumber, because the screaming out, that is in fact the connection that brings us to oneness with God. It's groaned. He said for their slumber, and we're beginning to hear his voice calling out to them in contrast. So in other words, we were calling to him, that we were beginning to be able to hear his voice, even though it may not be clear that it's actually a voice coming from God, but there is a voice there. In contrast, Pharaoh said, who is God that I should listen to his voice? Therefore God redeemed the Jews. Because they were worthy, they merited hearing his voice at Sinai, where they received the Torah and became God's chosen people. Now, let's just get a little bit more, because this is a very interesting story about Rabbi Nachman. Although directly this lesson was taught regarding the cantor of a place called Ladizin, whose sinful behavior Rabbi Nachman revealed. We saw this in note 1, where unfortunately he was involved with a married woman. So revealed indirectly. It also relates to other chazanim with whom the Rebbe had previous dealings. Rabbi Nachman gave this lesson just before he took up residence in the city of Breslev. So this is a little background on the lesson we just learned. Prior to that, he had spent 2 strife-ridden years in a place called Zlatopolia. at the end of which virtually the entire town had turned against him. Now this discord was by two Zlatopolia's chazanim, their chazanim. When Rabbi Nachman first arrived in Zlatopolia, just before Rosh Hashanah, which is 561, which was 1801, he was received very warmly. The townsfolk spared no effort in welcoming the Rebbe and invited him and his followers to pray in the central synagogue. This they did, and although, as it happened, Rabbi Nachman disapproved of the Chazan and his son-in-law, who were between them, led the Yom Kippur services. When he later criticized them, saying that they were praying just to impress their wives, these cantors became incensed and slandered Rabbi Nachman before the Shpola Zeida. Now, if you know anything about Rabbi Nachman in that area of Ukraine where these Hasidic groups were located, there was a great rabbi there, but called the Shpola Zeida. So the place is Shpola. He's the grandfather, the grandpa of Shpola. This initiated years of relentless persecution against the Breslev Hasidim. So this was a whole story, and this is what got it started. As we've seen over the course of the lesson, the two birds of impurity have the power to lead people astray. You could call those birds business. You can call those birds Marxism. You know, all the different isms, go through all different kinds of things. The birds will chirp in your head and tell you to go this way rather than that way. However, unlike outright sin, which is obvious, the song of the wicked influences in a far more subtle manner, drawing a person away from God, cooling his heart to holiness until he eventually succumbs to sin. So this is Gemara in Chagiga. He says concerning Archer and Greek songs, say for example, I don't know what that is. Also through the power of voice and speech, and frequently in a discreet manner as well, is the undermining of holiness caused by the very severe sin of slander. So that's where I got the idea that he's not just talking about music, that is music which is always sexual in nature in one way or another. The American music, I guess if you say classical music, maybe not jazz, I don't know. But I was raised on American music, so what can I tell you? Also through the power of voice and speech, and frequently in a discreet manner, as well as the undermining of holiness caused by the very severe sin of slander. Many times slander begins as an apparently benign remark, a defense of one's honor, a righting of a wrong, and the like. But Rabbi Nachman, as he's teaching here, teaches in lesson number 1, the evil inclination will often come to a person in the guise of a mitzvah. The mitzvah of opposing those whose opinions or ways are different from our own. I mean, look, Jews are all free people. We wind up going into cliques of all different sites, different types. Reb Nelson writes that these so-called mitzvahs, namely contentiousness and strife, are decidedly not part of the Torah's 613 mitzvahs. As the Rebbe teaches in this lesson, there is a need to judge everyone favorably. Each person hears the voice differently. Now, this is a big theme in Breslev. And you might think that in another Hasidic group where you see that there's a tremendous amount of everybody dressing the same way, everybody looking the same way, everybody doing the same kind of ideas. Here he's coming to say that everyone is individual. And he has a whole Torah which is called a Zamra Lakai Bo'odi. Let me sing out to God from who I am, not somebody else. Let me try to be somebody else. There is a need to judge everyone favorably, therefore. Each person hears the voice differently. And every person has his own unique aspect of Malchus, which he must strive to better by studying the Torah. Using these tools of Torah, study and judging others favorably, he can merit the two birds of holiness, the return of prophecy and the building of the temple, speedily in our days. Amen. And that is what to hope for and to work for. This is Baruch Flashman, Tikkun Elevator Kolo, and that is the end of the third Torah in Likutei Moharan.